Our next candidate is Mark Drummond, who most recently was Chief Operating Officer and Provost of a system of 17 college campuses located throughout the United Arab Emirates. He has a mix of system and campus experience, having served as Chancellor of California's Community College System and President of Eastern Washington University. In addition, Mark used his business background in the private sector, spending more than a decade at technology firms in California and Pennsylvania. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much.
We want to give you 5 to 7 minutes to offer opening remarks and specifically talk about why are you interested in exploring this opportunity.
Thank you very much, and again, good morning. And first, I want to thank you very much for asking me to come. I'm honored by the request, and very happy to be here. I probably won't take 5 to 7 minutes, but just give you a brief bio. First of all, my legal name is Marshall, so I see you have 2 Marshalls in this search. The odds of that aren't very good. There's not too many Marshalls around. And this has been very interesting for me, actually. I sort of feel like a consultant. I've had a lot of materials, and you have some very good stories and some rather vexing problems here, and I found it interesting to take a look at all that, for sure. Well, my history, I think it's well contained in my CV. Family-wise, my mother's family came from Georgia, actually fairly close to the border, and eventually migrated to Texas, where they still are. My father's family came from Pennsylvania and found its way to Washington State, where they became wheat farmers and lived, and they're all up there still. So I sort of had family from 2 ends of the country. I happen to have been born in San Francisco because my mother was there when it was time for me to be born. She was visiting. So by mistake, I got born in San Francisco, but I liked it so much I sort of stayed when I had the opportunity. Early on, I remember maybe I was 19 or maybe younger, I had a real interest in teaching, and then later a greater interest in higher education, because as I studied my core subjects, I came to realize that, and my family traveled a lot, so I got to go places that, actually some places there was a lot of poverty, interesting places, but I noticed a real relationship between access and education and poverty and opportunity at a fairly young age. And I came to believe very strongly that the unique thing about America was the open access public education as a social ladder of mobility, the people's ability to change their lives through taking advantage of public education. I became a strong believer in that and very interested in it. When I first started my career after college, I also was a sort of an early computer geek, except when I went to college there weren't many computers. There were only 3 courses in those days at San Jose State University in the engineering department to do with computers, and I took all 3 and hung around the computers a lot. When I got out of university with the bachelor's degree, my first job was with an AT&T affiliate, basically doing early on computer conversion of what before had been manual systems for telephone use and so forth. I did that for about 5 years while I was studying for my MBA part-time. But upon receiving the MBA, in fact, actually before I received it, I had an opportunity to start teaching at a 2-year college and teaching students basically how to program and operate computers. And I did that for a very specific reason. When I was at the telephone company, I kept asking, we were IBM based, and I kept asking people, what's going to become of all these folks that we're laying off? We were laying off droves of people who used to do things by hand, and now we were computerizing, and we were closing centers and consolidating. And they always told me, well, don't worry, Mark, there's lots of jobs in computers. They can sell them, they can fix them, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, that's well and good, but most of these people are not educated. They have high school diplomas and they know how to do their job. How will they transition into being computer workers? And that question was never satisfactorily answered. So I thought, well, fine, I'll just go teach at a 2-year college. And I was the first teacher there. I developed the curriculum and outreached, and it became a very large program over a number of years. That was really my beginning. And the rest of it, sort of falls into place. I mean, there's a lot of different pieces, but I guess the 2 biggest other pieces are I was doing consulting with some people in Pennsylvania for a number of years that were starting up a new company. In fact, they liked me so much they actually gave me an employee number. I was employee number 6 of this company. And when the company finally came to the point it was growing fast and going possibly to go public, they asked me if I would come and join them full-time. This was Systems and Computer Technology Corporation, SCT, which many of you use there. I'm sure here a lot of people use Banner or some derivative. Well, now they're all consolidated, and now there's this one company named Ellucian. Where they got that name, I don't know, but Ellucian owns all the old companies. They own IA, they own Datatel, they own everything. So I think you can't hardly buy higher education software unless you go to SAP, unless you deal with this company. Anyway, I went to Philadelphia, and I served as their chief development officer for software. And I did that. Actually, I was behind the Banner movement early on. Did that for 4.5 or 5 years, and then I decided I wanted to be back in higher education. And I went to the state of Washington. I was given a tenured professorship. And also then I served as their chief technology officer at Eastern Washington University, and I served as their chief financial officer, then later as their president for a decade. And I guess you came along just after I left. I think Elson Floyd, who worked for me, may have been your predecessor, and of course Elson's president at Washington State. And I might just mention that in passing in case I don't get a chance later. A number of people who have worked for me during the years are now presidents of fine universities and also chancellors. I've always felt that was an important part of what I do, is we are educators, and we certainly can take the time to help develop the people on our staffs and help them achieve their goals and aspirations. And I'm very proud of Elson, but I'm very proud of many others that are, as I say, chancellors and presidents. It's been very rewarding for me to be able to help these people move their careers along. Well, so back in Washington, the decade, and by the way, coming here, I remembered, I haven't been back since, frankly, to Orlando, but we had an arrangement with Central Florida that we would come and play men's and women's basketball preseason about this time of year. And it was a wonderful experience to come here and spend some time. I found we have 1,000 alumni within 100 miles of here, Eastern Washington does. And so I put on a big barbecue and invite all these people to the game and raise some money for scholarships. It was a good time. After Eastern Washington, I thought the 2 decades. I sort of had done what I needed to do. I was appointed to a newly minted professorship. I was doing quite a bit of research at the time, and they came up with a thing called professor of the university, which was a nice post, which I was going to occupy. I took a couple of months off to recalibrate, and during this time, I got a phone call from an old friend in Los Angeles who happened to be on the board of trustees of the Los Angeles community colleges. Now, that's a very large urban district. It has 9 colleges. Some of them are almost 100 years old. It has over 200,000 students, a very large urban institution. And it's very important, of course, to a lot of people in that community. But it wasn't something that I was particularly interested in getting involved with. But they said to me, Mark, we have this problem. We've been through 5 chancellors in 5 years. Nobody can seem to agree on anything. The place is a total mess and a total disaster. Would you consider coming for 1 year and serving as interim so we could calm things down and sort things out? And I told my wife, well, what do you think? And, oh, well, it's possible to do it. So I said, okay, fine, I'll go. I think I should talk to the selection committee. They had a large selection committee that was looking for a chancellor, and they had not found one. So out of courtesy, I told the people on the board, I should go talk to the committee. And I did. I went to Los Angeles, and lo and behold, there was Bill Allen, I don't know if you remember Steve Allen, the comedian. It was his son, and a bunch of Hollywood types on the search committee. It was quite interesting. I talked to them for about 2 hours, and finally I said, yeah, well, okay, I'm willing to come, and here's the things I think I can do to help stabilize this place. Well, I was walking out of the building, and somebody came running after me and said, Dr. Drummond, wait, you have to come back for a minute. And I said, no, I thought something was left unsaid. I went back into the room, and they said, now we quickly talked, and we decided we want you to come and be our real chancellor. We want you to come for 4 years. I said, well, now this is a whole different kettle of fish. I mean, I didn't apply for this job. My wife wasn't. I had a large ranch with a lot of horses in Washington, and on and on and on. And I said, I'll consider it. So I did consider it, and at the end of the day, I decided to take the assignment, mainly because, frankly, I felt a bit sorry for the place. It was serving over 200,000 students. The facilities were a wreck. Policies and procedures were a total mess. The whole thing was basically dysfunctional. So I agreed to go do it, and I did. One of the most pressing issues, while there were a lot of things to worry about, were facilities. They hadn't been touched since the 70s. I mean, there was basically no money invested in this place, and it was falling apart. In California, you can go to the public asking for general obligation bonds. Now, no one had been bold enough to do that. They were all afraid the voters would turn them down and embarrass them. And I convinced the board, look, we can, if we rationalize this right and we take this to the public, we can get a general obligation bond passed. And they agreed with me finally. We mounted a campaign and went out for $2 billion and passed it with close to 60% of the vote. At that time, you only needed 50%, 50 plus 1. So there was $2 billion in the pot to go and start to do maintenance and start to rebuild and add some new facilities. It was a very good thing. Now, I guess I'm getting close to my 5 minutes on this one. Close. Just shortly after I got all that done, and the money was there for the buildings, I had another call from the governor's office, and now this is, we had a recall, as you may have noticed. And Gray Davis was taken out of office, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was put in. And I had a call from his people saying, and he's from L.A., and I know him a little bit, and he said, well, basically, we need a new state chancellor. The state system is also poorly guided. It doesn't have a strategic plan. It doesn't have very clear terms of operations, and we would like you to come and serve as state chancellor. And that was another sort of a deviation. I was just getting ahead of steam up in LA to get all this building done. I had very good policies to be sure that we did the procurement right, that we took care of all the things so that we were transparent and publicly accountable. But I did agree, given all this sea change in California, that I would go to Sacramento and I would work basically in the administration for the appointed board and serve as state chancellor, which I did. Well, that was a good thing. It was interesting. We came up with the first ever in history strategic plan for the state. Did a lot of work on this degree alignment with workforce needs and many other things that we did. And it was a very interesting and good time. Now after about 4 years there, Los Angeles was sort of getting in trouble again. They ran out of money. The $2 billion just wasn't enough, and it wasn't enough. I told the board at the time, look, our needs analysis says we need $4 or $5 million. This is a big place. There's a lot of need, and the board wasn't bold enough to go for $4 or $5 million. So they said to me, well, would you come back and get the rest of the money? And I said, well, we've gotten things pretty well done in Sacramento, so yes, I'll come back to Los Angeles and I will see if I can get the rest of the money. And we subsequently quickly mounted 2 additional general obligation bond campaigns. These were a little bit harder sell, but we ended up with 6.7, almost $7 billion total to rebuild those colleges. And so I felt that was mission accomplished. And that's pretty much the end of the story. And then came the adventure in the United Arab Emirates, which was also unexpected and interesting, that I would tell you about if you want more information.
Go ahead, tell us. Yes, tell us.
Well, on this one, I don't think it's even, it may be in my CV, but early in my history I taught in the Graduate School of Business at the University of San Francisco. I used to teach statistics and modeling. I liked that, and they didn't have anyone to teach it, so I taught that for about 3 or 4 years. This is in the 70s, and there were quite a few sheikhs that came from Kuwait and what is now the UAE. I think the UAE, it wasn't even founded until the late 70s. But there were about 4 or 5 sheikhs came. And I got to know several of them quite well because they needed a lot of extra help, and I spent a lot of time helping them outside of class. And a couple of them I became quite friendly with, and really became lifelong friends. And we communicated a lot when they were traveling in the U.S. I would always visit with them. I never did go visit their country. I just simply never had time, and it just never happened that I went there. But we did have this communication. Well, this one chap, who's a member of the royal family in the UAE, had been appointed Minister of Higher Education 25 years ago. And he took it very seriously. They had a research university that was only then about 8 years old. It really wasn't a research university. It was just sort of a quagmire. He took that and straightened that around. He started a big women's liberal arts university. And then he started this distributed chain of 17 technical colleges, because engineering curriculum is a big need in that country, and they wanted to have civil engineering, mechanical engineering, some petroleum engineering available to nationals only. This is only for residents of the country in various parts of the country. Well, he started this thing 25 years ago, and it was built remarkably well. It was built on a Canadian model using the 3-year technical degree. And then through time, there was a decision made, well, it should really be a bachelor's degree, and we should get ABET accredited, all these things they'd done. But frankly, the problem was that that even though it was built well, and it was basically on a solid foundation, the governance was lacking. They really don't have a board. I mean, the sheikh is the board. It's a one-man shop. And they technically had a board that met once a year for 5 minutes to rubber stamp the curriculum, whatever. But I mean, frankly, the sheikh runs the place. And he simply had run out of people that he felt had the capacity to make the system work properly. And he asked me, would you come, and can you come, would you come, and spend some time studying this and advising me and getting this right. And I said, fine. So I went over there, frankly, as an advisor. I didn't go, it wasn't a job, quote unquote, that I got an employee number and all that. But when I got there and I analyzed it and I told him what needed to be done, he said, well, you have to go run it. And the only prohibition was that the law there says it must be a national who is the vice chancellor who's running the system. So he said, well, what we're going to do, we'll invent a whole new title and a whole new reality, and we'll put you in as provost and chief operating officer, and we'll tell this other guy to go out and do public relations, and you run the system. So that's what happened, and it was a fascinating experience. And, you know, the sum of it to me, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's California, whether it's the UAE, systems have a lot more similarity in their problems and in their operating realities than individual institutions. Individual institutions are very unique. Each one has its own personality. You know, the president or the chief officer is the symbol of the place. You have intimate relations with faculty and alumni and all these things. Systems are more abstract. You work for a board, and at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You're representing the board. You have to be very careful. It's not a one-man show. You're not out representing yourself. You're representing the board. So there's a real trick in making sure that you're having very good communications, very clear direction, and you know, you're kind of guiding this. It's almost like being, to me, in a way, a guide on some type of an expedition. You know, you're advising the board, you're guiding the board, and you're carrying out the mission of the board. Now, there's not a lot of people slapping you on the back saying, good job, great job, we love you, we're happy to see you. You're working for a governance system and a board. And as I say, that work, in my opinion, is quite different than institutional work. I rest my case now.
All right. Very enlightening. So if you take this job, what would you do in the first 90 days?
Well, certainly, I think right off the bat, I mean, it's getting to know you. I mean, I would need to get to know each board member and understand something about their perspective, what their concerns are, what they're happy about, what they're not happy about. And the same with the staff in the chancellor's office. I mean, I know a few people here, but not a lot, and it would take, I don't know if it would take 90 days. I don't think it would take that long. But I mean, I certainly would first turn my attention to becoming acquainted with the people and the issues. And I mean, I think I see a lot of the issues, but you have to validate this and verify it and prioritize. At the same time, you have some big ticket items on the table that can't really, in my opinion, can't wait a long time. I mean, there is, particularly the big ticket items I see is this being under siege with state apportionment. I mean, that's, maybe we'll talk more about that, but I mean, that's a major issue, and this extra credit, excess credit charge could be the big, hopefully every student knows about it and understands what it means, but there could be some very unpleasant surprises. I look at your data, you're expecting it almost to double this year, go over 200 million coming in from those excess service fees. Well, you know, students get to the end of their senior year and they get ready to graduate and go to work, and suddenly they get this huge bill. Hopefully they all know it's coming, but I think that there has to be, my guess is there needs to be some more policy work around that, and maybe some alternatives and ways to better support the students in getting through that knothole, if you will. But the whole tuition fee, the future, you simply can't compound tuition 15% a year. If I had two 12-year-old children and lived here, I'd be worried sick about what will happen when these children are 18 going to university. They need some predictability, and I think the Board of Governors, they don't control, you don't control that, but you have influence, and certainly through the communications capabilities of the Chancellor's office and others, it seems like that's a major issue to be addressed, and I don't think it should be put aside for very long. I think there needs to be a real plan. What's going to happen with this? How do we make an appeal? How do we do the communications and build the case so that the legislature knows they need to restore some of this funding, and or what are the other options? That's a big one. And then there is this issue about this core curriculum, which I think is not a small issue. It's sitting there. The legislature has done their thing. I went through a core curriculum revision once before you came to Washington. It took 3 years, and it was exhausting. It's not something that I would relish jumping into again, but I think here it's not going to be quite like that. But the core curriculum is a very touchy thing. It's an important thing. It's a touchy thing. It's important to students. It's important to student mobility if they want to move from institution to institution, and it's important for outcomes. So, those things I think can't wait more. I wouldn't say 90 days I'll get around to that. If I came, that among many other things I would be doing at the same time I was getting to know people.
In responding to your 15%,
Yes.
I mean, the board this year decided no tuition increase.
Yes.
And for a simple reason what you said, because in the last few years we had to increase the tuition as the funding decreased because the governor and the legislators had to be responsible. We have to balance our budget in the state of Florida. California doesn't have to do that. And for that reason, we had to work towards that. But still, we are a very affordable state. As you know, we're like number 45 in tuition, and it's something that I think the governor and the legislators are very interested in continuing doing that. And on the other hand, the Board of Governors is very interested in quality. We are more and more, and thanks to Governor Kuntz and his performance funding formulas that we're coming with, one of the biggest thing is that the quality. Well, quality cost.
Yes.
So one of the jobs the chancellor would be is to deal with the governor's office, with the House and the Senate, and to get the message across, and that they understand that the goal of the board and how important that is. So tell us about your experience in dealing with the governor's office, the legislators, and to make sure that all interests among the governor and the legislators and the Board of Governors are aligned.
Sure. Well, first let me reiterate, when I say I'm concerned about sort of tectonic plate shifts with tuition, I am concerned, but I also at the same time, Florida is to be commended. I mean, Florida and Texas have both had remarkably low tuition, and that's a big part of access. It's been a wonderful thing for so many years. It's been a great gift. It's been a great, one of the great features of Florida higher education. And my point is that it would be a pity to see that washed away, so to speak, and so to me, it's very important that the legislature feel good about the universities. They feel good about what's the investment they're making. They feel good about the product that's coming out the other end. You ask about relations. Now, my style, everybody has a different style. And I know your past chancellor was actually a politician, so he would have his style. My style has always been to pay, let's talk about the board first. I don't think a chancellor can be very remote from the board. It's not healthy for anyone. My past practice has always been that I, on a weekly basis, meet with board leadership to listen to them, to see what's the latest. What are you thinking about this? How does this sound to you? How is this going? To be sure we have very open communication. And at least once a month, my habit has been to actually sit with every board member for probably 1 hour once a month. I traveled the whole state of California. There I had also 17, but they were from all over the place. And I made absolutely sure that on a weekly basis, the board chairs and board leadership, we had 3 or 4 leaders of different committees, we met, and then all the board. Now the same thing with the legislature, the elected officials. There are certain committee chairs that are more important than others, obviously, that are critical to higher education. Well, you simply have to build relationships with them and their staff. And I think looking at the org chart, I mean, that's in Randy's bailiwick. I basically make sure that we're on the ball and that we have good, strong legislative relations people that are productive and working hard. And they basically guide me. Here's your schedule. You've got to go see these people this week. This is important. But while I'm following that, I'm also basically making relations with as many elected officials as I possibly can. But I do feel that there's no substitute for a strong government relations operation at a system office. I mean, the Chancellor's busy running around pleasing a lot of different people, listening to a lot of things, doing a lot. You need somebody that's minding the store all the time with legislative relations and setting the agenda, and that's a very important post. As far as the governor goes, my experience with governors, and I've worked everywhere from Ronald Reagan to Jerry Brown to Arnold Schwarzenegger, I've worked around a lot of governors in my time, including Mike Lowry and Gary Locke. Who, in Washington, they don't have a system. Each president has to basically relate to the legislature themselves and to the governor. I was lucky. I had some long-term family relationships with Lowry and Locke, and I had backdoor access. I could go have cookies and tea with the governor. If it's a small state, 3 million people, you can have a personal relationship. But in California, the key to the governor is the staff. You must have strong relations with the key members of the governor's staff. The governor is also distracted and busy, and while he needs to be a friend, certainly of the universities, the governor is a busy person, but their staff are the people who basically make the decisions and put things together. So that's the way I've handled that, and I've been successful at it. I mean, at Eastern Washington, I basically was able to rebuild the campus with capital money, which was odd out there in Eastern Washington. Built an enormous new library, redid a lot of facilities, built new facilities. Los Angeles, as I said, I was able to round up $7 billion to rebuild the place, and I've also done quite well with what you call PICO funds, but that is another political issue, and those are important, very important.
Thank you. Governor Frost?
First of all, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
Welcome to Florida.
Thank you.
I must say that you've had a wealth of experiences, and I'm sure we could learn a lot from you.
Thank you.
You're truly an advisor to a lot of different entities and personalities, it sounds like, and communities far beyond the states that you had worked in, far beyond just those few states. And who knows, maybe you'll come in as just chatting with us. You have a lot of good ideas. But you do know that this is a big state, and I think we're the second largest state system in the country. And we are looking, obviously, for someone with the leadership skills and the background, et cetera. And I have just a few questions. We ask the other people also, Chairman Hussaini, what would you do when you came on board the first, let's say, month and a half, 2 months, 90 days? What would be the first thing you would do here to tell us what path you would be going on?
Well, once again, I mean, you can't do much unless you know who's who. I mean, you have to meet people, and at least so they recognize me, I recognize them. There's a lot of people to meet, and there's a lot of people to listen to. I'm sure there's a lot of valuable information. One of the things that, and I mentioned to you a few, and I certainly would work with staff to, I'm not going to come in and say, oh, these are your 5 big ticket items, get them on the board table. But I mean, I certainly think there are things that need paying attention to that time just can't afford to be lost, that you need to keep on rolling. One thing I haven't talked about that I am very bullish on, if you will, and I'm very insistent upon, is accountability. In my staffs, a good way to find out about how I operate is to talk to these people that used to work for me, and I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you. But one of the things I insist upon for myself and my staff is that we all be accountable, that we all have defined goals that somehow overarching meet the goals of the board and the organization. There's a context to it. But everybody from the top to the bottom in the Chancellor's office needs to have a work plan, a set of goals that are measurable. And at the end of the year, I go through a rather exhausting process. And in the UAE, even, I was trying to teach them how to do this, and I was literally writing up evaluations for 17 different campus leaders based on their goals and their attainment. But we have to have metrics. In my world, we all have metrics, and we all pay attention to those metrics. So you know what I'm doing, I know what you're doing. Hopefully our metrics fit together so we aren't going off in every direction. We spend quite a bit of time on that, and whether or not that exists now, I don't know. If it didn't exist, I wouldn't wait very long before I started at least talking about that and laying out the method to start getting that done. I think it's very, very important. I'm not a scorched earth guy. If you, again, talk to people that have worked for me, I don't come in and get rid of everybody so I can bring in quote unquote my team. I don't have a team. I know a lot of good people out there that do a lot of good things. I think there's a lot of good people here. I respect institutional history. I respect the contributions people make to the institution. And my only request is that people be productive and cooperative, and that we build a new team, and that we be accountable. And this, I've always made those reports available to the board. They're usually interested in seeing what are our goals and what did we accomplish during the year, and it really goes into the evaluative process. So I wouldn't wait 90 days to start that either. That's a fourth of a year.
I think one of our strengths here has been that we have finally gotten down a set of metrics that we are sort of still working on, but I think that we're all almost all on the same page.
Yes.
And as you probably know in reading a little bit about our system, that we have a different kind of a governance structure. The universities each have their own board of trustees.
Yes.
And then we have this board, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a challenge unto itself. How would you start working with both university boards, presidents that these boards listen to, and communicating and trying to get them to understand our objectives and our matrix, et cetera?
Right. Good question. Well, California is not that different. California has a 17-member board, 15 members appointed by the governor, staggered terms. And in California, in the community college system, there are 72 jurisdictions. These are political subdivisions which elect boards. Now, that's a whole different kettle of fish. You actually have elected boards in 72 different jurisdictions. They have a total of 112 colleges, so some of those jurisdictions have more than one college. So you have 112 college presidents, you have 72 chancellor-type people, and you have 72 boards, all with different sort of intentions, regional intentions. Well, it sounds daunting, but it really isn't that bad. There's a fairly strong statewide organization of governing boards, which has a fairly strong voice. And so one thing you do immediately is you relate to those people. I mean, you go to that association and you take part in, to the extent they want you to, they take part in their meetings, you listen to them, you figure out what the common ground is between the state governing board and all these local boards. And there's a lot of common ground. There's 80% common ground, there's 20% that isn't common ground. What's different about California that makes it really difficult is you've got a very strong union presence. You've got two big full-time faculty unions. You've got about 4 part-time faculty unions, including the auto workers, if you can believe it. It's very bizarre. And then you have a very strong state employee organization, CSEA, and the AFTs in organizing staff. So you're dealing with probably at least 10 different unions. Now, the state chancellor doesn't negotiate with all those people, but they certainly have an influence in local elections, and these boards are getting locally elected. So there's a lot of, if you will, undercurrent that has to be understood and dealt with if you want to get to the common ground. The goal is that the state governing board sets minimal conditions. Those are very important. These are about financial operations and integrity. They're about student services operations, about curriculum, minimum standards. And I think that's very important for a governing board to do. These are the minimal conditions we expect the institutions to meet. Now, they can't be too low level or you're nitpicking and micromanaging. They have to be fairly high level and sensible. But if you can come up with minimal conditions, then the institutions know what the Board of Governors expects in general terms. If I get a chance, I'll mention something about graduate studies and research and how some minimal conditions would be helpful with that. But so the minimal conditions is really, that's sort of the statement that you put out. And by the way, in California, the one advantage I had as state chancellor is I had the purse strings. The $7 billion annual budget was appropriated to me, and I subdivided it and gave it to the colleges. So if the board set minimum conditions, said this is the conditions we expect you to adhere to operate, and the colleges either ignored or didn't meet those, the board had the authority, and we had the authority to withhold funding or limit funding. So you ask how you get people to cooperate. Well, that's the big stick. I mean, if you're controlling the money, people listen real quick. But the other way people listen, and I don't want to grab out all these reports, but your accountability report is a really good start. You know, moral suasion is powerful. In other words, people running institutions don't like to look stupid. They don't like to look like they're running an inferior operation. And if they have things that should be known, that are sort of under the blanket, if you will, that can go on and on and on. But to the extent that you have something like your accountability report, And if you have sort of a model that requires the individual institutions to contribute or have accountability reports, you probably solve 60 or 70% of the problem, because the facts are on the table, and these facts can't be ignored, and they become they go into the public domain. That's extremely important, and I commend you for, and I know you've been commended by others, but your accountability report is a big start.
Thank you. I'm going
Thank
to
you.
go to Governor Coons.
Thank you, Governor Hussaini. Appreciate you. You've come a long way, and certainly appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
Listening to you, you have had some incredible experiences, and I think you've seen a lot of what we're going through in our system as well. I really just have one question that you haven't touched on, which is, why do you want this job? You've done a lot of things.
I want to show Charlie Reed I can do better than he did. I worked elbow to elbow with Charlie for so long. I mean, Charlie and I were almost roommates. We worked so close together. He and I are very different characters, but we like each other.
It's a lot of change moving here, and
Right.
and just as you look at all the different things you've done.
Well, let me explain, basically. I'm really not quite done yet. I've been on this quest to become an excellent system administrator for a long time. And systems work is so different. I hate it when I go to a function and someone says, "What do you do?" The lady across the road from me is a pathologist. It's very easy for her. Everybody understands what she does. And they look at me, "What do you do?" Well, I run systems. And they say, "Well, oh, you're in air conditioning?" I mean, nobody understands, and it's probably good the public doesn't think much about systems. I mean, when the public thinks about universities, they think about University of Florida, Florida State, Central, West. They think about an institution, not about us at the system. And again, that's probably okay. But systems are incredibly important to the healthy and well-being of universities in a state. No matter how they're construed, they need to run right and run well. And issues of quality really stem from system governance, the insistence upon quality, and how you know that and how you encourage that. So I'm not finished yet. I did do one thing I hope I get to tell you about as well. It has to do with grade inflation, and it has to do with quality. I did it myself, actually, and I'm not done with that yet. But I'm just not done yet. And Florida's an appealing place. I've always liked Florida. Oddly enough, all my horses and mules live here now. They all live in Ocala. Now, that's not why I'd be coming. I was in the United Arab Emirates. I had my animals being tended to and also trained by a lady, and she had to relocate to Florida. And I was over there thinking, what am I going to do? I don't know how long I'm staying here. These animals are getting older. This isn't right. So I said, fine, I'm going to send them all with you. And I sent the whole load of them to Ocala. So I haven't had a chance to go see them on this trip, but there they all are. That's not the reason I would want to come, because of the animals, although I love them and I'm happy they're here with her. But I just think this is a challenge. It's one of the best challenges in the nation. You have some of the best institutions in the nation. You have an opportunity to have the best in many classes. If you look at your 2025 plan, if you achieve a lot of that, you will have the best in class. And it's appealing to me.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions, Governor.
Dr. Chopra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to Florida.
Thank you so much.
There might be other kind of animals that you have to deal with. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Let me pick up on the last point you made about us becoming more preeminent.
Yes.
What do you see, what do you envision as the number of AAU schools, and how do we get there?
The number of which schools?
AAU or...
Oh, AAU. Well, that's the gold standard. Well, let me just give you my observation about emerging institutions. You've got 12 universities here, 11 or 12. I think you have 12. The new one's staying, I think. So that's 12, assuming it stays. Let's just say 12. Well, how many then have been founded since 1960? I don't know why 1960. That's just an interesting marker for me. It seems like an institution founded since 1960 I would call a young institution. Well, you have 8 of the 12. Mm-hmm. 8 of the 12 founded since 1960. So you have mostly young institutions, 8 of them, and you have a couple really young institutions, very young. Now, having had experience with what happens when the pressure's on to get more prestige and fairly quickly, Prestige is important. I mean, my gosh, I was at Eastern Washington. It wasn't nearly as easy for me to raise money as it was for the University of Washington. Bill Gerberding could knock on the door a lot higher than I could. But I was determined to get my share as well, with development and with recognition and so forth. Well, there are three things that boards and presidents usually do with emerging institutions to quickly ramp up their reputation. First one usually is they try to add some degrees that will bring notoriety. And those are usually PhDs. That's one of the first things a university will want to do if it wants to get beyond the comprehensive classification. It will want some PhDs. The second thing it will do is it will decide it's going to greatly ramp up grants and funded research. And that's mostly federal, but there's other sources as well. But I mean, that's the second thing they usually do. And by the way, I've been involved to some degree in all of this, done it myself. The third thing they usually do is they go to the Division I athletics. And they say, oh boy, if I can just get on national TV. Of course, you all are so lucky because, you get more prime time, at least out in the West where I live. You get more prime time than Obama, more than Oprah, and more than X Factor. I mean, I cannot turn on the television, but the University of Florida or Florida State isn't on there. Honestly, I mean, they're just constantly on ESPN. Every channel I look at, and it's fine. I enjoy it. But certainly, that you couldn't pay for that sort of exposure. But other schools think, well, I can get some of that too. Now, Central Florida, I noticed, is ranked 21. I think they beat Houston the other day. That's
17.
Good. Oh, they went up. I didn't see today.
My home institute.
All right, they're 17. Well, and but so was Fresno State was ranked. Well, that's all good. All I'm saying is those are things that unknown small institutions that are emerging often do to get recognition. They think that will get them on the public way, and it does. It definitely changes things. But those all come at a price. I mean, Florida Rising talks about intercollegiate athletic spending. To me, by the way, it's kind of sad they put that in there. They put three things in that report that to me is old wine in new bottles. It's arguments that we've been having for 50 years, and we don't need to waste the board's time with these arguments. I mean, this thing, do you buy test tubes or do you buy weights for the training room? That's the athletic spending. The other one is, what about freedom of expression? That's been going on since Patrick Henry laid down his quill. I mean, do we have an open season with some rules, or do we have free speech areas? I've been through every flavor of that, and there's no right answer. But you don't need to spend all the board's time on those sorts of things. I mean, you need to have, what is the policy going to be, and then let's live with it. And then the third one is building utilization. Now, we just had a 3-day weekend. I was here, so I didn't do the 3-day thing, but everybody likes 3-day weekends. They're very nice because you get a day in the middle that you can be free. You don't have to go to work the next day. But at a university, if you don't have very strict guidelines and minimal conditions about scheduling, I can guarantee you a university will slide to a 4-day work week. Every week will be a 3-day weekend. I'll tell you how I found that out at Eastern. We had no policy that said that's okay, but I used to watch the receipts very closely from our enterprises. And all of a sudden, our self-service laundry and the hamburger, the fast food places, they're all losing money now on Friday. They were making money. What on earth happened? We have more students. How can we be losing money? And then the attendance at football games on Saturday was shot. So I sent, I've got a bunch of students rounded up and told them to go out to the parking lots. I wanted them to do some surveys, license plate surveys, and we ran them through to see who was who and who was going where. The end of it is, everybody was leaving. Most of the students at Eastern Washington University come from Seattle, and they live at Eastern. There's about 4,000 of them that in those days, lived in the dormitory. Well, if they can leave town on Thursday, they go home to mom and let her do the wash, have a good dinner and see their friends, and then they come back on Sunday. So basically, thanks to the scheduling laxity, we were evacuating the campus on Friday. Well, I quickly changed that. But it didn't happen because of a policy. It happened because of a slow migration and scheduling and people's preferences. So these are the kind of things that boards need to be aware of. I mean, I don't think it should be in that report. It's not really, it's sort of common sense. But there should be some types of guidelines and minimum conditions that when people are doing scheduling, they understand how that's going to be done. And then you don't run into those things. I don't think I completely answered your question about these emerging institutions, but AAU, I mean, that sort of takes care of itself. I mean, the requirements for AAU are so well known, and I know you have one school that's close to being AAU. I mean,
well, we have one in AAU.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, AAU is the gold standard. There's no question. And it's great you have one in. It would be nice if you had 3 in. But, I mean, and here again, the board's intentions in that way, the board itself can't make that happen. That's an institutional matter. But the board's intentions and the board's support and the board's attention to that, particularly if you get performance funding. You have a little bit. I was surprised I think it's great what's going on, but at least according to the data I saw, there's only $84 million last year in performance funding. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket compared to what you're spending. I mean, you need $1 billion or $2 billion performance funding, so you can really put, the meat on the table and say, look, get these things done, and this is how you will be rewarded.
Then we're going to take a copy of that video and take it around.
Yeah, we like that.
Of course, thank
I'm going to
you.
use that for our negotiations.
Yes.
But if I can take you back, you said that you communicate quite regularly with board members in
Yes.
California. How about the other constituents? Do you have places where you're communicating directly
Yes.
with faculty and students?
Yes, I mean, there was no choice, but I mean, I enjoy doing it. So there's actually an interesting article, if you go to Google, that the California Journal wrote about me that talks about this very, very subject. This guy followed me around for 2 weeks, and he wrote this article. I just read it because I thought, well, they'll be Googling me. I should see what's in there. And this California Journal article is it's very. Yes, in California, all of these organizations have statewide associations. There's a statewide faculty senate. There is a statewide classified employees organization, statewide trustees board. All the different constituencies have statewide boards. So, and they mostly have a professional overseeing that, full-time person or a staff. So, you obviously have to relate to them. And it's just not all the chancellor. I mean, you've got a staff, a communications staff, and other folks in the office that need to be active relating. The other thing I did, and I didn't mention this before in California, I also, see, to me, I was a public employee. I sort of owed it to people to show my face. Whether or not they were nice to me, I owed it to them to show my face. I didn't want to just be locked up. The guy before me, a nice fellow, by the way, very nice fellow. He was an attorney, but he was kind of a micro guy, and he just stayed in the chancellor's office. 17 years he was in there. He never went out. Honestly, they never saw him at most of the colleges. Well, what I said was, look, I'm going to make a commitment to see every college every year. Now, there's 112 colleges, so divide that into how many days you've got. I had to devise a schedule where I could see more than one a day, because they were regional. But at the same time, I made sure that I was there. And I would always, if the leadership, now I'm not going to go in and impose my will on a local president or a board, but if the leadership wanted, I was more than happy to have a public forum to answer system questions for the students, answer system questions for the faculty, and they usually wanted it. And so I would go to the college and get there early. Sometimes we'd have breakfast, sometimes we'd have lunch, sometimes we'd have no food. But always meet with the leadership, listen to them, meet with any board members that would care to come meet with me, so I could know, and then meet with the students. I learned a lot, and actually I solved some problems, believe it or not. I mean, I found a few things that were stuck in the bureaucratic mill on my way around the state, and I was able quite easily to break those things loose. Some facilities things, some large grant things that I didn't know about, that hadn't reached me, but they were stuck, and they'd been stuck for a year. And just by listening to these people, I was able to help them by doing that. And I think what it did is, when I came to colleges, the presidents didn't pull down the shades and sort of turn down the lights. They came to see me. I'm not sure they were. No one's in love with systems people usually. I mean, I'm from the system office. I'm here to help you. That's an old story. But to the extent you can be helpful, and you can be helpful, you can be transparent, you can be honest. Honesty goes a long ways. You tell these people. Sometimes they don't like to hear what you have to tell them, but you tell them the truth, and you have real dialogues with them. I felt my relations with the presidents and with the boards and with the general system were quite good. And I did the same thing, by the way, in the UAE. I don't speak Arabic very much. I speak a little bit. But I went to every single one of those 17 colleges every single month and showed my face. I feel strongly about that. But that's a chancellor job, because the people, the chancellor is sort of a mystery thing. What is a chancellor? We already have the president and all this. You need to go show your face so they know you're not some monster hiding away somewhere.
I know we're running short on time. One last quick question. Do you believe in a strong central model, or do you think the one we have with the Board of Trustees is the best?
I'm not really big on strong central. I'll tell you why, because what you want is excellence. And unless you have 12 Einsteins sitting around at the central, you're not going to get excellence. I mean, you're going to have excellence at the institutions. What the central can offer is the standards and the guidelines and the general direction. Again, the key is that it's general enough that the institutions have the flexibility to fit it under it and go in the right direction, but still manifest their own vision and dreams and be responsible. Again, I'm back to this accountability. I have some suggestions, which we don't have to talk about, for the accountability report. It's a great start. There's a few things that it could be helped with, but, you know, that's a really important thing. And as I say, the wonderful thing would be if you could have a system accountability report, but then somehow get each college to kind of fill in their blanks, and you'd have one that had 12 subdivisions in it. That would be really great. But it's a very, very, very good start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Drummond. Do you have any parting words for us?
I want to, just because I've spent a lot of time with research in my day, a lot of time in Washington and D.C. I used to do a lot of lobbying to get money, and I've had some success with that. But I just want to make a few comments about research, because I feel obligated to say these things to you. You know, first of all, funded research is not free. I think you all know that. The national average of institutional support for funded research is 20%. That's the national average. So that means every $1 million you have in research, 200,000 is coming from general fund or something else to support it. You've got to front load it. You've got to have the right facilities. You've got to hire the right people to do the research. And federal grants never cover, their contracts never cover, really, rarely anyway, 100% of the activity. So you just have to be, I'm not saying it's bad, don't get me wrong at all. I'm just saying it's a commitment of resources to greatly expand research. And you're talking about going from 1.68 billion now to 3.25 in your 25-year plan. Ambitious, impressive, but that's an issue. Second issue is, one thing I don't see anywhere in here, and maybe you know all this, and I'm just talking out of my hat, but or into my hat, but one thing that you need to know as a board is what's up with the indirects. Now, indirects are about 40% of, I don't know what your rate is. Every institution would have their own rate. You have to negotiate it. But let's just say it's an average of 40%. What that means is that for every $1 million you get from the feds, they're going to give you $400,000 to cover indirect costs. Now, indirect costs can cover things like utilities, building maintenance, libraries, administration, if they're properly structured. Now, when I was at Eastern Washington, I used to charge about 10% of my salary to federal indirects, and it was audited, and it was fine, because I really spent the time doing it. I mean, I was involved with the grants, getting the grants, monitoring the grants, making sure that all was right. Well, we're talking about a lot of money. If you're talking a billion, you're talking 400 million. If you're talking 3 billion, you're talking 1.2 billion. That's a lot of money. Now, if you have 12 different institutions, and they're all doing grant accounting slightly differently, there's Office of Management and Budget puts out a thing called Circular A21 that's like, that tells you, that's the rules about grant accounting and indirects, what you can do, what you can't do. And, you know, you have to be careful. Like the guy at University of California, Santa Barbara built a heated doghouse with some indirects. Well, he wasn't around long. In fact, he almost went to jail. What I'm saying is you can legitimately plan and use these indirects to support your infrastructure. And you do have in this system infrastructure problems, and you've got to have some solutions. Well, if you're successful already with grants, and you're going to be much, much, much more successful, this governing board should have, again, some minimal conditions and standards to do with how indirects are accounted for and how they're utilized and how they're reported. It's a lot of money, and it's important money, and it can do a lot, as I say, to help stabilize your infrastructure and offset some very expensive, important costs. I couldn't find that anywhere in any of these materials, and I just wanted to tell you that I've spent a lot of my life with that. Can I tell you one more thing, just briefly, that I want you to know? Because this is a personal passion that most chancellors wouldn't have. It's an odd thing. It's a bit professory. But, you know, since the 1990s, accrediting associations have insisted that we have outcomes for everything. We have to have institutional outcomes, college outcomes, program outcomes. The ones I'm really interested in are the student learning outcomes for courses. Every course, I'm sure that every course at every one of your universities has student learning outcomes, and those are developed by the faculty in the department. For instance, let's take chemistry. Chemistry 1. The faculty will agree, here's the 15 things that if a student completes this course, they should master. They should know these 15 things. Now, what I never could understand is why we don't tie learning outcomes and the evidence to course grades. You talk about grade inflation and all this stuff. Well, the two are never connected. I mean, you've put all this work into learning outcomes. You even, I don't know if you use Curriculum.net here. It's a very nice system that when you build your catalog, it insists that you have the learning outcomes and it cross-references them and makes it all it makes it right. Anyway, to make a long story short, here I never really kind of mounted the horse, if you will, because there's too much union resistance towards talking about learning outcomes. Course grades are my prerogative, leave me alone, blah, blah, blah. But it always troubled me that we don't tie student achievement learning outcomes by course to a course grade. I've never seen it done. So I get to the United Arab Emirates, and I told the Sheikh, I said, Sheikh, I sat with him and told him this. I said, this is a disconnect. Why do we do this? He said, well, don't do it. He said, go connect the two. It's fine with me. I said, wonderful. So what I did was I got a team of people together, the lead faculty from all the institutions in chemistry, let's say. And I said, I want you to develop a test for me that shows mastery of these 15 outcomes. A student should be able to demonstrate, and you're a smart professor, you should be able to make a test that will tell me if they know these things. And then to sort of add a little more to it, I brought in some international experts just to double check and be sure that it was all, going right. And we developed these tests. Now, some of these tests were practical. You actually had to mix some chemicals, or you had to weld an aircraft wing. But most of them, a lot of them were multiple choice or essay type things. But anyway, there were tests developed for first I did a pilot, and I developed had tests developed for about 40 courses that tested if the student knew the learning outcome. Well, I call these SWAs. And there's, by the way, in my CV, which I think you have, there's a reference to an article I wrote in the Australian Journal that details all this. But anyhow, what I did was I didn't announce this. The faculty knew what I was up to, but I didn't tell them who was going to get SWA'd. I waited until the last week of the term, and then we took a 10% random sample of the courses, and we notified them you're going to be SWA'd. We administered the SWAs that week, and then we put them in the mill. Well, here came the course grades. Here's the SWAs. Well, it was amazing what came out. Economics, for instance. Not one student passed the SWA. Not one. Nobody passed the SWA. And this was developed by the faculty. This isn't some mysterious thing. Yet everybody got A's and B's in those courses. So here you've got all A's and B's in the course. Everybody fails the SWA. So, well, what on earth happened? So we sent an investigation squad of faculty in to dig into it. Well, we found out what happened. Many faculty weren't requiring the textbooks because they said they were too difficult. Well, then why did you require them in the first place? There were a lot of questions and a lot of issues. It's not always about the teaching learning. It could be that the SWA is defective. It could be that the learning goals need alignment. But most of the time, it's something in the teaching learning process. The first year, we did this 4 years now. The first year, there was so much stuff out of whack. It was just amazing. I mean, everybody getting good grades and everybody doing poorly on the SWAs. The only exception was math and English. That was interesting, and it's kind of logical. That's more straightforward and there's less flexibility in those subjects. But they were quite on. And I put an arbitrary range of 15%. I said, if you're within 15%, and that was just out of my head, it's nothing magical. So I had to have some marker. So I said 15% between the course grades and the SWAs, you're okay. If you're more than 15% off, you're getting red flagged. And what has to happen is we have to have an investigation into it, not penalties. We aren't going to go punish people. We want to find out what went wrong, what's going on. An investigation, a plan to fix it, okay? And then we're going to keep SWAing that course. In other words, once the red flag's there, we're going to SWA you until the green flag comes. Amazing. That eliminates grade inflation. There's no possible way to have grade inflation if you can equate what people actually learn in the course with the grade that they're being given. It just eliminates it. So I'm an evangelist for that. I'm not finished with that one. I'm going to, unions or no unions, I will keep writing and talking about if we're going to have learning outcomes, we should equate them to course grades.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
Dr. Drummond. It was fantastic, and thank you for coming.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to see you, and I appreciate everything Randy's done.
Committee, we will have a half-hour break. We will promptly start at 1 o'clock.
102.
Well, 1 o'clock we'll start.
Something we brought in here for you guys.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you. I was hoping you were going to get it.
I'll be back. I'm going to be up.